Hello creative friends, my name is Cassandra from Crazy Craft Obsession and I'm back with another tutorial video / scrapbook process video, whatever you want to call it, for you guys today. It's using the Simple Stories Fun Times collection that we announced we'd be using for some tutorials, and we have announced the next couple of collections that we'll be using, so I'll leave some information in the description box about that. I chose this beautiful stripe pattern paper from the collection and trimmed 2 inches off one side so that I've got a 10 by 12 inch piece of paper. This is so that I've got a top and bottom when I lay out my strips. I then went and cut out my strips individually just along where the colour meets the new colour, and I'm going to overlap them slightly so I get a little bit of a border of that white pattern paper on the other side of the layout as well. So there'll be a border on all 4 sides of the white cardstock. I'm then taking my Tim Holtz edge distresser, but you could use a pair of scissors or another edge distresser. There's plenty on the market there to ripple the sides and distress them a little bit. And I'm going to be doing some mixed media techniques. Some information that we got on our community page, if you're not a member, I'll leave the link in the description box, was that people want to use their Distress Oxides a little bit more. We've bought them, they've been on the market for ages. I released a video recently about the different ink types, so I'll leave a link to that as well in case you're not familiar with them. But Distress Oxides is something that's really popular here in Australia and America. So I'm releasing videos called Technique Tuesday, which describe how you can use these, and then they'll have a process video matching them so that you can follow along and use these products. Because my layout is rainbow, I've chosen, how many is there? 7 different Distress Oxides to use for this layout. We've got Kitsch Flamingo, Candied Apple, Spiced Marmalade, Mustard Seed, Crushed Olive, Salvage Patina, and Peacock Feathers. You can see them all laid out there. If you're wondering what the little black things are, that is actually my dome foams for my ink pads. The trouble with Distress Oxide is that they're a pigment ink as well as a dye ink. They're a hybrid ink pad, so that pigment ink can actually transfer to other ink pads if you share your brushes between them. For this reason, I usually use the dome foams, and I have one dedicated to each colour. I just picked up these cute little round containers that fit inside a bigger container from our local Kmart or $2 shop here in Australia, and I've written on the top what colour it is with a paint pen, and that's where my dome foams live. Very easily done for any style of ink pad, but I have only done it for my dome foams for Distress Oxides. I then marked my page where my piece of pink pattern paper is going to sit, and I'm taking my Distress Oxide dome foam on the blending brush, starting in the center and blending out to get a smooth edge. Now this is sped up 2 times. It is a little bit of a slow process. You want to make sure that your dome foam is fully saturated over your ink pad. And the thing with Distress Oxide ink pads is that you want to move it around because it's a stacked felt ink pad to get that full saturation. So you want to load up your dome foam by moving it around the ink pad. Then you want to start in the center where your paper is going to cover, because you'll see here on the Candied Apple, the red one, that it's highly saturated when you put your dome foam down on a piece of paper. And then as you move it around and get rid of that ink, you're going to get a little bit more of a subtle effect, and you can kind of blend it out to the point where it looks like it blends in with the white. This is something to keep in mind. It's something I've learned a long time ago using Distress Oxides. And because we're starting off with some simple techniques, I thought Distress Oxide blending was one of the more simpler ones. You can see I'm coming back in with that pink just to soften that overlap a little bit. Because they're that pigment ink as well, they're not translucent, they're opaque, they're going to stack on top of each other. So if you make a mistake, there is a little bit of a buffer there where you can come back in with the other colour and you can blend it out. Now I'm coming in with that Spiced Marmalade and doing the top and bottom. You'll see that I'm leaving a massive gap in the center. That's because my pattern paper is going to sit over the top, so I don't need to blend there. A great way to practice this technique is just to practice it on a small piece of cardstock first, so you get a feel for how the inks are going to spread and blend. And I will say every color is different. Every color formulation of ink is different. It might have a little bit more liquid to it. It might have a little bit more pigment to it. You really just need to get the feel of the ink pad at the time. Now coming in with the mustard seed, you can see it's going to blend very nicely into that orange, and I'm just doing the top and bottom. It also depends on how saturated your ink pads are. If you've used them for a long time or they've sat open for a long time, they're going to have less ink in them and they might need some re-inking. You can buy cute little re-inkers for them. I've got them in my collection because I use them not only for re-inking my ink pads but for mixed media techniques as well. So it is a double whammy when you buy them. But sometimes I feel like my crushed olive here is quite dry, so it might need re-inking as well. You can see I've got to go back to it quite a few times to resaturate my dome blending brush. I'm just going to blend that out a little bit by bringing in a little bit more yellow. And then we're going to go on to salvage patina. You can see I'm always lining up my strips to make sure that mixed media has spread far enough, but it is a really forgiving technique. You can come back in. I forgot to mention this type of distress technique, because there are many of techniques you can use with Distress Oxide. Not only is a blending technique, but it's a technique I like to call the halo effect. The reason why I call it this is because you're essentially creating a halo of ink around your pattern paper. There's other mixed media techniques that you can use to layer the ink on the background and have that as your base formula so that you're not going to have your pattern paper. I wouldn't call that a halo effect. I call it something different. But today we're focusing on this halo effect technique because it's the most forgiving that I know of. Now I'm bringing in all of my pattern papers to make sure they fit on and create that border that I want. And I do have a darker blue there. I'd put tape on it beforehand and forgotten to remove it so that I could do this technique. So I'm just using a different strip because they all measure the same width to be able to do that, to be able to measure that out. Once I've got my peacock feathers, which is one of my favorite colors, on my layout, I'm going to come in and add some splatters to each one. To do this, I'm going to use an acrylic block, but you can use a mixed media mat, a glass surface, a piece of packaging, whatever you've got that's going to resist some water. I'm just going to smear each ink pad on there and then add a little bit of clean water and use a paintbrush, flicking it slightly to add some splatters. The reason why you need to water down your ink pads to do this technique is because the ink itself isn't fluid enough to flick off the end of your paintbrush. You can do painting with Distress Oxides, but in order to get that splatter effect where it randomly flicks off the end of your brush, you need to add a little bit of water to water it down. I'm going to do that for each color. I am using my left hand so that I can stop the color from going across onto other colors that I don't want it to. So for example, the green mixing with the yellow, we're going to stop that. And then I'm also using a number 4 round brush. The bigger the brush, the bigger the splatters. People like to use a fan brush. Other people like to use a size 8 brush. It all depends on your preference. I would say if you've got a paintbrush in your collection, why not give it a try? We never know how it's going to turn out. You can predict these things, but really with mixed media, you have to expect a little bit of randomness on your layout. Now that my splatters are complete, because Distress Oxides are a pigment / dye ink, a hybrid ink, they do take a little while to dry. So I'm going to go over this with my heat gun, just making sure that everything is perfectly dry so that I don't accidentally put my elbow in it, because I am prone of doing that. I'm then coming in with some Dina Wakley acrylic spray. This is in white. I love this spray for white splatters. It is my favorite. The reason being is that because it's an acrylic paint inside a spray bottle, it sits on top of your surface and doesn't sink in. So you get these pure white, whereas some other sprays and white colors will sink in so that it's kind of like a whitey pink or a whitey blue, depending on the color it sits on top of. Now that that's all dry, I'm going to come in and stick down my pieces of pattern paper. I do have a few pencil marks there showing me randomly where to go, but ultimately you can kind of pair it up with your ink colors. I am adding double-sided tape to the back of it with some glue, because when you're doing mixed media, I always feel like it's best to add liquid glue to everything so that it sticks down. Otherwise, sometimes with mixed media, especially when you're using gesso, which I haven't used here, it can peel up very easily, and the double-sided tape doesn't like to stick as easily. The wet glue works really, really well. I haven't used gesso here. It wasn't needed for this particular technique, but I think it's just a good habit to get into when you're using mixed media, to use a little bit of liquid glue as well as your double-sided tape. Now that all my pieces are down, I'm going to add an extra effect to it. I always like taking my layouts to the next level, and the way that you can do this for your layout is simply with a black pen. My favorite black pens are the Micron Pigment ink pens. You get them in a pack of different sizes, but ultimately any black pen will work. I'm just going around the outside and adding some faux stitches, which creates a little bit of a border and definition between that paper pattern strip and your mixed media. Just takes your layout to the next level. Totally optional. If you've got a sewing machine, you can use that too. I haven't broken my sewing machine out of the box yet, my new sewing machine. Maybe one day. But for me, a pen works perfectly fine. Then I'm bringing in my embellishments. So again, these are from the Fun Time collection, except for the thickers on the left. That's Vicky Boughton thickers. And I'm just layering my ephemera tone on tone roughly. It doesn't have to be perfect. You'll see my yellow So Much Fun piece of ephemera down the bottom spans across the orange, the yellow and the green. As long as it's roughly in place, your eye is naturally going to be appealed by it. Then I'm working on my title. I'm just going to put it at the bottom of these photos. I've stuck down my photos with some foam underneath them to prop them up. I do have 3 photos of my son here. He is playing at Time Zone, which is just like an arcade area here in Australia, and having a great time. I have covered over his face because the internet is quite scary for me. So I've covered over his face with a little dot there, but you get the general gist. They're very highly coloured photos, which is why a multicolored layout goes really, really well with them. Now that I've got my title in place, which is a combination of Vicky Boughton thickers and Doodlebug thickers, the little tiny ones are Doodlebug, I'm going to be sticking down my ephemera. Now I'm doing a combination of ephemera and stickers today from the cardstock sticker sheet. And all of the things that I'm using will be linked in the description box down below if you're interested. You can see there I'm adding a little bit of glue regardless of if it's a sticker or not. That comes back to the mixed media technique. Maybe if you live in a cold time zone, you might not need to use liquid glue. Here in Australia, it gets quite warm and humid in our summers, and adhesive is a real issue. What else am I doing? I'm creating some little clusters. So you can see in the top right hand corner of my photos, I've created a little cluster there with the ribbon and the say cheese. I didn't like what the ribbon had to say, so I've just covered it over. Down the bottom, I'm using these gorgeous balloon animals and a balloon and tiny word stickers. Then right down the bottom of my photo, I've got that So Much Fun, and I'm going to create a balloon and a few other things there as well. You'll see just above that is where I'm adding my journaling strips when the layout is done. I won't do that on camera, but I have left a spot for them if you want to add journaling strips to your layout. Then we're going to come over and make our way to the pink and work kind of through the pink layout, the pink strip, and add a few embellishments there as well. Really, this would work for any collection that's got a rainbow theme to it or multiple colors. Tone on tone embellishing is one of the easiest ways I find to use up random ephemera that's left in the collection. It is one of my favorite ways to use up ephemera, and I just love the way the layouts look in your album when you have a look at them after the fact, because you'll have for me, I'm not a chronological scrapper, but I put them in my album chronologically. So for me, I have random photos from, say, an event, and then this really bright rainbow layout, which I absolutely love. It just breaks up all the other layouts. When this is done, I will be doing some still shots that you'll be able to have a look at. Feel free to scrap lift them. I feel like that's what we as content creators ideally make these videos for is to inspire you, teach you new techniques, and get you to get out your supplies. It's something I'm very passionate about. Now I'm going to add my sprinkly bits to my layout. I've got some ephemera stars that I'm adding here and there in tone on tone color order. And then I'm going to bring in some enamel dots. The stars I'm just adding randomly with a piece of glue. The enamel dots, however, I don't know, when I add them randomly, it doesn't sit well with me. My OCD goes a little bit crazy over it. So I like to add them in groups of 3. Now you might be a little bit different. You might want to add them all randomly across your layout, and that's perfectly fine. It's just a quirk that I've got. So you'll see I'll add 3 dots of glue, and then I'll put some enamel dots in random sizes along with that as well in the tone on tone color order. I'm just randomly filling in the gaps that are open as well. I'm not choosing specific places to put these enamel dots. I'm kind of just working my way from the big ephemera down to the little ephemera and then to the bling to fill in spaces as well and draw some interest. Then when that's done, there will be the still shots. Make sure you check out the description box below. Thank you so much for supporting us, and I guess we will see you for the next layout.